This is Jeremy and Nathan's Canadian filmmaking adventures.
Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Jeremy here.
And it's Nathan here.
And we are today coming to you from the Ancaster Memorial Arts Center in beautiful Ancaster.
Sitting in room 213 where I run all my film classes.
Yeah, this is the home base for the Hamilton Film Festival.
It is.
And we have a live studio audience today.
One of my co-op students is sitting in.
Which is great. Today, we are excited to be talking about Nathan's favorite part of the filmmaking process, post-production.
Yes. I think this is the part where all the tools are on the table.
Yes.
And all the pieces, and you get to build something.
Right.
This is the third time you make your movie, right? You
Yeah.
wrote it, then you shot it, and what you shoot sometimes is different than what you originally wrote. Better or worse, who knows? And then post-production, you have all the pieces now.
It's all there.
You get to either craft something new or just stick to the script and see what you can. But I love it. I absolutely love what sound can do, what music can do, what a great edit can do. Just love it. To me, it's the most creative part, I think.
It's such an exciting moment when, maybe you've been working, like you've been editing some of the scenes and then you start putting them together in a film.
Yeah.
And you see like a few in a row and it's like, oh my gosh, I can just feel the flow. Mm-hmm. Such a great feeling.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter how many times you know that you don't shoot a movie in order.
Yeah.
But once you start putting it in order, you're like, it worked.
It worked.
It worked. And of course it's going to work because, you started with a plan. But just to see it and then to think, okay, this is working.
Yeah, it's so true.
And aside from the creative aspect of it, there is definitely an organizational and technical aspect of it that has to be dealt with.
Yeah.
Like you can't get around it. Even if you're a creative person, there's a big part of it that is organizing and technical.
It's so true. Yeah. And, in the old days, you'd walk into the edit room with a whole whack of tapes. In fact, I remember getting off airplanes with like boxes of tape. Half my luggage would be tapes, Betacam tapes. You know what I mean?
I was old enough to be bringing out film cans.
Back in the old days, kids. Film cans even before that. Mm-hmm. Today it's all about the hard drive.
Right.
But yeah, when you're dealing with a feature film and you've got, 24, 30 hours of footage sometimes, or maybe you only have a couple hours of footage, depending on, how your shooting style. But you have to really be careful about how you manage that.
Yeah.
Particularly if there's other people involved, like an editor, they're going to need to be really diligent about organizing it.
And I know in all these previous podcasts, we haven't really talked about the technical aspect of things.
Not a whole lot.
We don't want to come across like we're just like, oh, let's go shoot a movie and we don't think about the technical things. That'll be season 2. We can get into the technical aspects and the organizational aspects of it. But your editor might not have been on set. They might not even know what the movie's about.
Hardly,
and you just dump a bunch of footage on them and they don't know where things go.
Yeah.
What's your process for organizing stuff? You get day one in post-production. What happens? I'm a backup person. I'm like this. You shoot something, back it up.
Yeah, everything I do is always in 3 places, and never in the same building. Yeah, I have a stack of drives that are the backups to the backups, and they live in sort of a small vault. It's so important. I have had drives go down a few times.
Yep.
And usually at really inopportune times on client work, which is horrible. And every time anything remotely like that happens, you upgrade your system, your process needs to be upgraded because that kind of stuff can't happen. Mm-hmm. I've even seen, again, not to get too technical, but like RAID systems, which are designed to be, sort of indestructible because the data is spread out over various drives.
Right.
Lost a drive there and stuff was literally lost. It wouldn't rebuild, And I remember being on the phone with tech support and whatever else. So yeah, it's so critical that things are in multiple places and you can't do anything else until that's done.
Right.
Don't even think about it. It's so important to get everything backed up. But then once that is done, organizing, I think most people probably lay it out by scenes. Presumably you've kept track of your scene numbers and all that sort of thing. So you can start to build those bins in your edit system and get everything in a way that you can find it easily. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there's footage where there's those little gems or nuggets or transitional street scenes or whatever it is that you need to find. You got to know where to look for them and keep them in a place that's handy, right?
So me as an editor, being, more of the creative mind, I like to just get, like, once I've done the organizing and it's in the system, I like to start throwing stuff in the timeline just to see what things look like.
Yeah.
And I know there's other editors that like to watch everything. They just like to go through stuff and see what's there. And I don't have the patience for that. But what about you? What are you like do you review everything and take notes, or do you just like get it going?
I feel like I always have those things. It's like, I just need to know how it's going to look if it's completely done. So often the first thing I do is I'll throw in some clip into the timeline that I'm desperate to look at, and I'll actually like color it, and I'll like, maybe tweak the sound or whatever it is. I just need to know that it's going to be perfect.
Good.
Exactly.
I think there's probably a lot of people just like you that do that.
Yeah. I've always kind of been the type of person who has, when I'm editing, where my first edit is almost like an online. Like I'm not crazy about, just cutting it with rough sound or that sort of thing. Like, I'm kind of a polish as I go sort of person. And I have a few, and this is getting quite technical, but I have a few sort of filters and plugins that I use in a timeline for audio, for example, that I'll add those right away. Because I think part of my selection process is knowing that it's going to be good when it's polished. You know what I mean? Because I want to hear it fully. I want to see every detail of it to know that I'm not going to be struggling with some issue with it later.
And I think the modern tools allow that. They do. For sure.
Yeah.
When I edited on 16, it was different. You don't just throw stuff in a timeline.
On the Steenbeck?
Right. There's no Steenbeck timeline. No. I reviewed every single everything. Yeah. You just put it on you just line it up and hit play and watch and make notes and make notes and make notes and make notes. It's just like pages of notes.
Yeah.
And then, because, you might cut something, splice two reels together.
Yeah.
And then it might take you 20 minutes to put it back together the way it was before, to add another frame.
Oh, I know.
Or something, right? But the way it's done now, you can do it. You can throw stuff in a timeline, color it.
Yeah.
Upgrade the sound, pretty much make it look like you said,
it's all right
there. It's an online edit right there.
It's all right there. Not to spend too much time in the past, but in college, what you're talking about there, like a Steenbeck and that, we would shoot on 16 millimeter. And this kind of phased out as I went through college. So that was sort of the time period. By the end of college, we were working in nonlinear, but they were a bit clunky and archaic. But yeah, with film, like you're literally, you get a print made from your negative, and that print you can cut and scratch it all up all you want, because to make your final product, you're going back to your negative and getting some professional to edit it in a dust-free facility. But I don't even know how they cut features like that, because I could barely handle a 1-minute short film with all those little strips of film hanging everywhere on the hooks. But a Steenbeck, for anyone who doesn't know, almost looks like a turntable with a screen, like a little projector screen, and the film, like you're literally threading your film all day long.
Yeah.
Like it's brutal.
Yeah, I think I cut on an Intercine. I don't know if it was a Steinbeck, but very similar.
Same idea. Yeah, same idea.
It was great though. You learn a lot about editing, because you have to think about your edit before you do it.
You really do.
Now you don't have to.
Yeah.
You can just drop stuff in the timeline, just lengthen, shorten. Okay, that works.
Well, and even so, we'd kind of go from Steenbeck to tape to tape, like Betacam machines or whatever. And again, you had to kind of pre-program your edit and wait for it to execute. And if you started redoing it, you'd destroy the tape. If you did it too many times, you'd start to get static and whatever else in your tape. Anyway, fast forward.
And here we are now.
Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve. I have to share this. I had early on in my career, I got hired to do I think I was like a camera guy on a gig. It was like a multi-camera live thing. And I was in the car with, like, this other company hired me, and we were driving to the location, and they said to me, what are you editing with? And at the time, I had just bought my system and everything else. And Final Cut Pro was, really brand new. It was reasonably priced. And Avid and that, they were like $60,000 setups. Final Cut Pro was $1,400. So it was a bit of a no-brainer, right? When you're starting out. And it did basically everything that Avid did. I learned on Avid in college. And I didn't like it. So these guys said, what are you editing on? I was like, Final Cut Pro. And they said, no, we're using Avid. We like to roll with the big boys.
Oh my God.
I wanted to stop, I wanted them to stop the car, and I was going to get out then and there.
I hate that attitude.
Yeah.
Across the board.
I know.
Whether it's with music or anything, whenever they're like, that's for, then you're not the person I want to work with.
And even when it comes to cameras, like there's whatever the charge is per day, $2,000, $3,000 a day, Arri cameras, which are beautiful, but there are so many competitors that are in the sort of sub $5,000 that for 90% of what you're going to need to shoot are more than adequate and can look almost identical. And this is partly because of the post-production tools. The post-production tools right now allow you to fix so many problems in one piece of software.
I know. It's great.
I've almost completely switched over to Resolve because I love the audio tools now. Any of the fixing, the color, all that stuff. Like if you can learn it, it's all right there at your fingertips.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It really is.
I know that whoever was laughing at you about Avid is probably using Resolve or whatever now. And even if they're not, there's a book you can send them. It's Walter Murch, How I Edited Cold Mountain Using Final Cut Pro, and he used that as a test. Like I think it might have been one of the first major like Hollywood films being edited on Final Cut Pro.
Yeah.
And he did these side-by-side tests with everything as he was editing the movie, and he wrote a book about it. And that's the kind of things like in your face, buddy. Like
I know.
If it's good enough for Walter Murch, then no, I that's a terrible attitude for anyone to have, whether it's a camera. It's like terrible.
Yeah,
terrible.
That moment stuck with me more than it probably should have.
You know how many times there was, we're still in post-production, so
yes.
I was doing music for a TV series, and I was on vacation. Or was going on vacation. It was going to be in Chicago, and they were like, we're going to need some music. So I'm like, okay. So I brought my laptop and my little MIDI keyboard. And on my laptop, I only had GarageBand.
GarageBand is awesome.
I cannot tell you the amount of people I talk. Well, GarageBand, it's fun for playing around with. It's fun for kids, like all this, da-da-da. You got to use this and that. And I did a whole bunch of cues just in GarageBand while I was in Chicago and sent them. And then they aired like the next week.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a ridiculous attitude.
I know.
It almost says like you don't really understand the creation process, because it has nothing to do with the brand name that you're, it's just with what can you do with those kind of things.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
There's so many like even well-known people that say, oh, I've got all these great guitars, but the one I go to is this junky little one I bought at a garage sale, and I just love the tone of it, right? It's just...
And then, like, shortly after that...
Tools always change, too.
They do always change. Shortly after that, Avid came out with their sort of lower-grade version that was $1,400.
Yeah.
And it did almost everything the $60,000 one did, right? I've always found Avid really not intuitive. So I've used it to actually edit, like, a series once. And I just never reached that point where I fell in love with it.
Yeah.
Like some of these other ones. For me, I think part of it is there's like people have different motivations behind it. Sometimes you're working on a system that might be better suited to maybe series production or longer form or sharing collaborative work, right? Where you have multiple editors. I feel like my drive is always like about efficiency, but like how do I get the most out of these tools so that it can look as professional as possible with as little effort as possible in a sense. Not that I am lazy or avoid effort, but you want to be able to produce that result quickly.
In post-production, whether you're editing or whether you're sound editing or mixing or composing, it's all about telling the story.
Yes.
The storytelling process will kind of remain the same. The tools will change.
Yeah.
You all want them to do the same thing as to how do you craft a story out of the footage that you have, right?
Yes.
So, like you said, Media 100 is what I first learned on. I don't even know if that exists anymore. Probably not, right?
So, yeah.
But that turned into, I think then I went to Final Cut next after that.
Yeah.
And then after Final Cut, I went to Adobe Premiere, and I've pretty much stayed in the Adobe Premiere lane for the last decade or so.
And there's certain things I just can't do in Resolve, and I use Premiere.
Yep.
Going to broadcast or that. There's certain tools they have.
Yeah. And the tools change, and some of them are faster and easier to use, but the actual process is the same.
It is.
You're putting one scene in front of the other.
Yeah.
You're adding a clip here or there. Like you're still trying to craft a story ultimately.
I have often felt like tools can inspire you.
Yeah.
Oddly.
Yeah.
They, for various reasons. But I see where you're going here. And storytelling is always going to be the most important thing. It's going to drive everything else. I talked to you about organizing on day one. How do you start telling your story in the edit? I
guess it depends on the project. So if music video, I do a lot of music video editing.
Yeah.
And then corporate stuff. And then for me, it all starts with the first shot. That's like get the first. What I say this to my students as well. Someone's sitting down at their computer. They press play. What's the first thing they're going to see? And then it gets them to think a little bit. Like,
Yeah, that's good.
because it's your first impression, right? They're going to hit play. Is it going to be some long black screen with a little white text or something? What is it going to be when someone sits down and hits play? I think of that all the time. Like and then it goes from there. And almost always, once I get the first shot in, it almost intuitively tells you, okay, this has to be next because of what you just put there.
Yeah.
You got to go into this.
Right.
And then and then you find the flow of it, right?
Yeah.
That usually comes with, and I'm typically the director and the editor for
Right.
the music videos and stuff. So I kind of already know what I'm going to be editing. So as the editing's happening in my head, I'm like, I know I've got that shot.
Yeah.
Here's the drummer doing a fill. I know I'm going to go right into the singer strumming a chord there. And then there's a saxophone player. I know I want the reaction shot of the singer looking as if he's listening to the sax player.
Yeah,
I can already see that. But it always starts with shot one. And that's when it starts to feel real to me. Like, not so much after it's all built, but the very first shot. You hit play, boom, there it is. Okay, now it feels like a video or a movie or something.
Yeah, one thing about storytelling, and particularly in film, is the beginning and the end is so important. It's that first impression and the last impression is, you know what I mean? It's very important to your audience. That's all I have to say about that.
There you go. And then nothing in the middle.
First and last.
We're just going to show you the first scene
Right.
and the ending scene, and you get to imagine the middle.
But the first and last are really important in life. Do you know what I mean? We really love those experiences.
Everything, but no, that's true. Because you've created the arc when you've written your story. And everything from that first scene to the last, you're building from that opening scene to the last scene, right? Those are really, really important things to start from and lead up to.
Yeah. And, often there's kind of a pace change.
Yep.
And you see this in movies too, where there's kind of like this slow build. And as that plot starts to develop, as you start to get to know your characters more, the expositional stuff is out of the way, there's an acceleration that happens. And now everything's about working towards that climax, right?
Yep.
And then it's going to kind of come down and ease out after that, typically.
Yep.
And please break convention whenever you like. But sometimes my cuts are a little slow in my own work. And I think it's great when you're working like on television, you're working to a schedule. It really forces you to get in there and figure out what you don't need.
Right.
And increase that pace and whatever it is. 'Cause I think, too, when you've just come off set, you get this great footage you're in love with, you want it all in there.
Yeah.
But then when you're at the end of the editing process and you start sharing it with people or whatever else, and you're looking for that feedback, you start to realize, you start to see it through different eyes.
Yeah.
Really, when you're watching it with somebody else, it's like a totally different experience.
Yeah.
Even if they don't say anything, completely changes the way you see it, and all of a sudden everything feels slow to me. It's like, oh, I got to go back and cut that. And so I think that is actually a really good process. I think like your first version of the script not necessarily being your last version, your first edit shouldn't be your last version.
Right.
You got to take that time, get that feedback to tighten it, dial it in.
So when you're speaking with television, because you and I, of course, worked on Wild Child, and you did the first, you did the first edit, right? You created the template as to what the show was going to look like.
Yes.
And we had, we originally got the deal through the Bell 5 program.
Yep.
So time length wasn't as
Wasn't really
important
important
because
to
it was
them.
streaming.
Yeah.
But you and I talked. We said we want to make sure that this is also ready for television.
Yeah.
So we knew roughly, the length of it. And then when we got to the television sale, it was very specific in terms of post-production. So if we're doing a creative show and it's our own project, we can make it whatever length we want. We can kind of, there's no real rules when it's your own creative thing. But when you're doing something, delivering, let's say for television, this is where like the technical comes back in. Some of the things you have to do to deliver it to television.
Yes.
So can you talk about some of the...
Yeah, there are a lot of specifications when it comes to delivering for TV in particular. Well, for any sort of professional venue, let's call it.
And you do more than just Wild Child. There's other television network you deliver for.
Yes. Yeah, and actually I remember some of the earlier shows I was involved with the edit on, delivering them and getting rejected. So you learn a lot
Yeah.
by doing that. There were things I'd never heard of, like white
Right.
levels. What the heck is a white level? Apparently they're blown out. Okay. So yeah, it's a process of kind of figuring that all out. It's not fun reading through specification guidelines, and often you
And
might,
they come from the network.
yeah, they come from the network, and you might have an editor that you're working with who's really familiar with that. I think you and I have a tendency to sort of be very involved in the edits of our stuff, and it depends on the scale of the project, of course. But yeah, it's a bit of a science delivering to spec, because you've got audio level expectations, and you've got picture, color, saturation limitations. Now it's gotten a little easier because there
Commercial
are
breaks?
Yeah, commercial breaks, right. So that's kind of where you were going with all that. There's something fun about that. That's when it really starts to feel like a real show. When when you're creating a bumper and it's going to black,
Yeah.
right? And then it comes back. Like there's something really kind of, it feels like it's just a stage where it feels really finished and polished when you get to do those things. Typically in a half hour, I think you've got, depends on the broadcaster, sort of 2 or 3 commercial breaks. And there might be some requirements around, your credit lengths or things like that.
Captioning, right? In post-production,
Captioning,
you have to deliver caption.
Yeah, again, all those things. I think captioning I still find for commercials, I tend to do it in-house. But I know, like with Wild Child, for example, we had to outsource it. It was just too big.
Yeah.
And it gets a little finicky in there, and that's a real specialty. And you can't make mistakes in that stuff.
And we
very
also
important
had
now.
to have descriptive captioning.
Yeah, the descriptive
Right.
video, I think it is. Descriptive audio.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where it was basically somebody speaking the action that you're seeing. And I guess it's meant for people who are visually impaired, for anyone who's not that familiar with it. But these things are becoming more and more standard now. I think caption is kind of across the board standard. Commercials, television, whatever it is. If you're in Canada, you got to deliver that. It hasn't quite happened in the U.S. I do a few commercials in the U.S. and they don't care. No captioning for them.
And like with Adobe and I use Adobe, there's a now built-in captioning.
Yeah.
Where you just hit generate and it scans your audio and delivers captions for you. And it doesn't always work. You have to go in and change a word or 15. But
I think it is important to get that stuff right, especially with these accessibility pieces.
Yep.
It just allows your content to reach a broader audience, and it's all about being respectful of everyone's limitations,
so that everyone has access to it.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the post-production process that you might not even think of until you get to that point where you make a sale, right?
Yeah.
That might not even
No.
cross your mind. Especially like if you're doing an independent short film.
Yeah.
Your mind is like, I'm going to make the short film. I'm going to submit it to this festival, that festival, that festival. I'm going to throw it up on my YouTube channel.
Yes.
Right. So you have a specific thing in mind, but then you get a job like this. You got to get it ready for television.
Yeah.
And then you have to, think of post-production almost in a different way.
Now, we got really lucky on Wild Child because we found an organization in the States, or you did, and they were looking for content, and they would take the content in exchange for providing the accessibility files.
Yep.
And it was a perfect fit for us. Yeah.
So they aired on their streaming niche network in the States.
Yeah.
And they give us the files, and it was all free. It didn't cost us anything.
And that would have been a huge expense for us on that.
So it's almost like the license fee.
Yeah.
But instead of giving you a license fee, we'll give you all the captions, the described video, and the captioning. So we have the broadcaster, which is Yes TV, the streamer, which is Fibe TV, and then the DCMP, which is it's like the niche streamer in the US.
Right.
And they provided us the captioning for free in exchange for our show Wild Child being on their streaming service. And it has to be family friendly. It has to, which is where we really landed with good points, is that we were family friendly. And they were wonderful. And they said, tell your friends. Like they don't do a lot of advertising. It's usually through word of mouth. And I only found out about it through a local company, Turtlebox.
Oh, okay.
They told me about this program.
They do a lot of kids
And then through
content.
there, I found them. And so.
Yeah, they were really great.
It was nice to share those resources. And here we are sharing them with you.
Yeah,
our
awesome.
listeners.
So I'd love to get back to storytelling and kind of the next chapter of it. And it's when you start bringing in some of those other elements that really are all about creating that audience experience, that emotion, know, through your content. And when I say emotion, it's not always about tears, but you now have the opportunity to create some sort of effect on your audience.
Yep.
And that's when I was talking about like pace and that, it's really fun to play with.
Yes.
How you can, in quotes, manipulate the audience experience.
Yep.
And I say that respectfully.
No, respectfully, yes. And I don't shy away from the fact that when you're making a movie, you are manipulating the audience 100% of the way. Like you are in 100% control of the audience. Like that is what is happening. You're deciding what they see and when they see it. Whether
Now,
you're the director, the editor, the composer, like you're in control here. And that's the great thing, is because you can craft that suspense or that emotion. And well, you have to. That's your job as a filmmaker. You're doing this, right? And I love that aspect of it.
I do
that you
too.
can make someone feel a certain way just by doing a certain thing, right? It's
And I don't think I totally realized that was happening when I set out to make my first film. I don't think I totally realized that like power or that sort of the joy of that until I had that first screening, and I had people coming up to me who were like, "Oh, this story is just reminds me of something that happened to me," and even more recently, I remember screening like Artless, who talked about a film that we did, and this woman came up to us at the end. Christina and I were sitting like in the corner of the theater, and she had tears rolling down her face, and the ending of that thing is intended to kind of mess with you. And I felt a little bit bad for her, but I also felt really satisfied.
Can I take a picture of you crying there so I can use it for my marketing?
Yeah, she was just like, "Oh, you guys, I'm just glad to see you're here and you're okay." And but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. No, it's true. Like I'm always thinking about the audience.
Yes.
When you're doing this kind of thing, is yes, I'm making the movie because it's something I want to do, but I want people to see it.
Yeah.
And I want to like make them feel something. And when you're in post-production whether it's with sound or music or just the edits that you do, it is absolutely, you're in the driver's seat here, and you can manipulate this any way you want. And you can change it.
You can.
Right, you can take a scene that is supposed to be meant to be a certain way, and then you can alter it somehow by just a piece of music or the sound you put into it, and it can change the dynamic of the scene. And I think you should try those things as well. Like if you're locked on a piece of music and you think, "Oh, this might not be working," and you're not sure why. You can totally change it up. What if we took the music out? What if we swapped it with something a little different? But I love that process.
Yes.
Now, I'm a composer.
Yeah,
I've been doing music forever,
Yep.
since I was like 15 years old. So when I'm looking at something, I generally have an idea of what it's going to sound like, but I'm also not afraid to say, "This is terrible, this sucks," and then and I will do things where I'll create something and I'll have a whole thing set up with all the strings and whatever, and if it's not working, I will literally like take that file and put it in the garbage.
Oh my
I'll
gosh.
like delete it completely. I'm like,
wow.
I'll be like, I'm so confident that this isn't working. I need a complete fresh table. I don't ever want to look at that again. And I just get rid of it.
Wow.
Completely. I'm very destructive that way. I'm not afraid to slash and burn. Yeah.
I know you did the music like for Wild Child, and you've done it for a ton of other things too. What is your process for approaching that? Because there was a ton of music in that thing, and you went through every style anyone could ever imagine. And it was, but it, I'm starting to answer the question for you, but it always seemed like it was driven by the content.
Yeah.
Because when they were doing archery, it sounded like Robin Hood.
Yeah. That was intentional. Yeah.
So talk a bit about that.
That just what you said. Like you look at the scene, what's happening, what's the first thing that comes to my mind?
Yeah.
Right. They did archery. I'm like, Sherwood Forest, some lutes and that kind of thing. And I'm like, that's what I'll do. That's the first thing that came to my mind. Let's just go with that.
It was so good.
And then there was like I think the barrel challenge they were doing.
Right.
They had to think about how they're going to get this food barrel up in a tree, and most of that first part of the scene was them thinking.
Right.
So in my head, I'm like gears turning. Right. So I thought that 16th note, and something playful so that it showed that the gears were turning. That's the first thing that came to my mind. I'm like, well, let's just do that. Just come up with a little 16th note loop, and that's it. I just look at the scene and whatever the first thing that comes to mind, I do that.
Yeah.
And if it works, it's great, and I leave it and I walk away from it. And if it doesn't, I just put it literally in the trash. I do not save it.
Yeah.
Like it's gone. I don't want to see it again.
And just, we talk a lot about a few sort of key titles here. Wild Child is a kids show.
Yeah.
That's it's like a wilderness skills challenge for kids. It's sort of simple challenges that the kids go through one after another to learn outdoor skills. And so so you created all these different styles that sort of reflected the different challenges that they were doing. And I know there was some where, they were running through the woods and you had like sort of that classic reality show music, sort of like
it's just what whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, it's cool.
And then hopefully it works. And then hopefully the producer says yes.
Yeah.
Which is us. And
Right, yeah.
Sure.
We said yes.
Let's go. Let's do that.
Yeah.
But I've done music before where it's been rejected and they're just like, no, that's not
really.
This is not the direction we're going in. And like, and then I just have to throw it out. And then also, if you're for hire, it's different. I know we're talking more from a creative process to indie filmmakers where you're the one in control of the project.
Scale.
But if you're working for somebody else, it's a very different.
It is
different process. You're serving somebody else's story, and you kind of have to. If you want your money, you got to follow what they're doing.
Yeah.
But when you're creating, you really have the opportunity to try stuff, and sometimes it just you feel, oh, maybe I'm doing too much here, and then you scale it back and you just throw a single note in. Yeah. Let's just see what happens if I just hit an E on a piano and let it reverb. And I'm like, oh.
And sometimes that's enough.
Did something interesting, and then okay, good.
And sometimes, like I've done music as well for some of my more sort of pet projects, and sometimes while I'm editing, I'll have my music software running as well, and so I'll like put a few shots together or whatever, and then I literally will just turn to the keyboard and hit some notes. And so like with Artless, for example, the music was kind of written. As soon as the edit was done, the music was written. I just had to record it.
Yeah. So you did it as you were editing?
Yeah, I really did.
Wow.
Yeah, because I just felt it. You just wanted to like kind of immerse myself in it.
It's interesting, you directed it and edited it. I'm assuming you were the editor, right?
Yeah.
And the composer. So you almost knew where the beats were without having to spot it yourself, to sit down and think,
I didn't have to communicate anything to anyone.
Yeah. and that's I find that's the case with a lot of indie filmmakers is you do about 6 different things on the production. And it's not unheard of now because you have a piece of software to edit. It also comes with something you can plug in a MIDI keyboard to and record to, right? So it's not unheard of that you can have an entire post-production studio right at your desk with just a couple of screens and a couple of programs.
Now, maybe it'd be a better film if I had other people involved and I was, collaborating with them.
But it's this is your creative project.
It really
right?
was. Yeah.
If you feel it needs somebody, then you bring somebody in, right? Yeah. But if it's your baby, which is the case with a lot of independent filmmakers and their short films, like they have this vision, they really want to get it out. That's what you do. And that's kind of how you learn as well. There's no reason why you can't do it, right? The tools are there, and if the drive is there and you want to do it.
Yep. Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there could have been somebody that could have played my part in East End, but it was my baby. That
wasn't why you were doing it.
I wrote myself into the movie because
absolutely
that was something I wanted to do, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I think when you have those skills and interests, that's why you're doing it. It's,
right. The passion project.
Yeah. That's why you're doing it.
That's all. Yeah, it's all part of that adventure, and that's how going back to like our early podcast is where everything feels like day one. Mm-hmm. You're starting over each and every time, right? It's a new sculpture you're making, right? You're not making the one you just made. You're starting from scratch with new materials and
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So as we come to the conclusion of this post-production episode, as we come to the
post-production adventure,
the post-production adventure, Nathan. Your tips for people?
Don't be afraid to use the tools that you have access to. Don't worry about what the industry is using. Don't worry about those coffee shop conversations where people are saying, oh, you got to use this, you got to use that. Don't. Just use what you have. That's all you have access to. Learn how to use that the best you can until it's time to move on to the next one or you can afford it. But do not be afraid to use only what you have and just make the best thing you can with that.
Yeah. I think you're right. There are a lot of, in quotes, rules out there in the industry. And
I call them tools, right? They're tools, not rules.
Tools, not rules. But I mean, there's a lot of opinion on what you should and shouldn't be doing. But I think what we're talking about here is about getting to that purity of your filmmaking vision and unapologetically going for it.
Yep.
Doing it your way, and just making it happen in a way that reflects your expression, your vision.
Yes, and that becomes your style because you only used what you had access to, and it might be very specific to you, and that's how that's where your voice comes from.
Yeah. All right. On that note, we'll wrap it up here. Next time, we're looking forward to talking about release and exhibition, which Nathan, as somebody who runs a film festival, I think is going to be a great resource on that.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that.
I'm sure you do. Yeah. All right. So thanks so much for tuning in, Nathan. A pleasure as always.
All right. We'll see you next time, Jeremy.
Okay. Take care, everyone.